looking up here. Only when you're talking do I roll my eyes.
I just thought you were looking up because, you know, you're not quite as tall as I am sometimes. Even
that is part of the problem. I am vertically challenged.
Alrighty, so without further ado, if you do not want to be recorded, please take your likeness off of the video. I would ask that anyway so that we can share out the whole screen for Chris. And if you don't speak, you won't be recorded. So I've done my part. So without further ado, one of the managing partners with Forsyte, Chris Irwin. Chris, feel free, please, to keep your camera on so we can see you in little aspect ratio.
I know you don't want to do that, but I'll leave it on just for you, buddy.
Much more entertaining. So without further ado, Chris, I'll turn it over to you.
Appreciate it, David. As David mentioned, my name is Chris Irwin. I'm one of the partners here at Forsyte, Microsoft partner, and I had the fortunate experience to spend over a decade at MS with Dave, a good chunk of that in the education space. And so what we've really tried to do is build on some of the great Microsoft tools that were out there. We do a ton of work in education. We had a lot of customers that were in hybrid environments. They had, G Suite for their email and stuff, and they were trying to take advantage of some of the teams, particularly towards the end of the year when we started having the remote work really kick in, and we were really forced into that scenario. And so one of the things that we saw working through Teams, we were doing a lot of Teams deployments at the time, phone system migrations, et cetera, and we saw a huge need for calendaring, particularly with these G Suite customers. And so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen out. Let me know if you can see my screen, David. Once it pops up here. And I'll keep talking while that's happening.
Yep.
So
go ahead.
We were looking for a way to really enable Microsoft customers that really want to leverage Teams, but they're unable to go away from G Suite for whatever reason. They love it or don't have time to migrate or what have you, to give them a much better experience in Teams. And so we came up with a solution we call Calendar Connect. Real simple interface, gives you some basic branding options in here. You can go upload a logo. You can put your organization name. You can have it split up for multiple domains if you've got a student organization and a teacher tenant, those type of things. Really, really basic interface. And then we've got an associated Teams app. All you got to do, you can set this up in 15 or 20 minutes. We create you an account. You come do your branding. Come over here and download the app, and there's a nice little video in here that kind of explains what Calendar Connect does. And once you've got the app, it shows up in an app manifest. And for those of you that are unfamiliar, you just go into the Teams dashboard, and there's a multitude of ways to deploy that application out. What that looks like, drag this over here, is this. So in my particular instance, I've got this pinned up as a sidebar item, shows up, and this pulls my Google Calendar. So if I'm going to pull down my Google Calendar here so you guys can see that as well. You can see I've got multiple calendars on here. They show up in different colors, etc. And that shows up and is mirrored on my calendar in the Teams application. Now, to take that a step further, we want to give you the ability to generate Teams meetings, join Teams meetings, those type of things straight out of here. So if you click on any of those squares, you're going to be prompted and you'll be able to go and set up a meeting. So let's say we're going to do this. Hour, I can add guests in here. I can choose the calendar that I want to bind this to. So if I want to be on my project team calendar or my attendee team calendar, all of the basic stuff you'd expect. And you can just create calendar invites that way if you'd like, or if you click add a Teams meeting here, this actually goes out and queries the Teams API and pulls back your organization's Teams information, just like it would if you were using the Outlook add-in. When I hit save, that's going to be injected directly into my Google Calendar. And so we see it shows up over here on Friday, and we'll pull over my G Suite calendar, and there's my MS office hours. And we can see the join information in here, et cetera. So whether I'm in G Suite and using my calendar information, or I'm in Teams and taking advantage of the other goodness in Teams, I have the ability now to go through and create and generate Teams meetings, online meetings, et cetera, directly in my G Suite calendar. This is bi-directional. The creation event shows up on the G Suite side immediately. There's a short refresh period, so if I go create something directly on the G Suite calendar, it'll take 20 or 30 seconds, and that'll be imported into this calendar. So there is a little bit of lag time, but it's fairly minimal. Gives your end users a much better experience as opposed to having to be in multiple locations they can continue to work in teams and collaborate and really leverage the wonderful collaboration platform that Microsoft built in Teams and get a more native experience. For those of you that use Teams on a regular basis, you'll see the calendar icon up here. That doesn't happen if you don't have an Office 365 mailbox. So you can use Teams without a mailbox, and that's one of the great things about this tool is it doesn't require you to go through and generate an Office 365 mailbox and create all the forwarding rules. I happen to have one because I have a mailbox in Office 365, but that won't show up if you don't have it, and you'll be able to access this and generate Teams meetings, etc., and still take advantage of that G Suite calendar. So pretty straightforward product. Like I said, it's a really, really simple install. Doesn't require a whole lot of effort from an IT perspective, and really want to work on enhancing the collaboration across organizations. And this was really born out of some of those hybrid organizations where faculty and staff were in a Microsoft environment and the students were in a Google environment, and they needed to be able to leverage a cohesive collaboration platform. We've also seen use for this in some of the other environments in like statewide systems where they've got mixed environments and they're trying to do some collaboration or some type of shared service across the board. You know, maybe you've got the CIO group in a system-wide organization and you want them to all be members of the team platform and be able to leverage it. And that kind of leads into the next solution that Dave asked us to talk about, which is a solution we call Cloud Connect. We were a big identity shop. We've been doing identity for a long time, and we were helping a small consortium try to do gal synchronization across 6 or 8 tenants. And we were going to use MIM for that, the built-in Microsoft tool, which works fairly well for that. But the problem we ran into is it's a complicated project in that you've got to get coordination across all these multiple environments. You've got to get access to on-premise systems, et cetera. And so what we came up with and doing a little bit out of the box thinking was a tool we call Calendar Connect or Cloud Connect. And what Cloud Connect is going to let you do is B2B account synchronization across multiple tenants. The reason that's important is because you get enhanced collaboration features with those B2B accounts versus external accounts, particularly in Teams. So within the Teams environment, now I can invite these people into a team. I can give them access to resources in a team, and they can get that full collaborative experience, whereas an external user can't. I can also go through, aside from Teams, get a unified global address list, which is important in a lot of environments. I can give them access to Azure resources, applications in Azure, et cetera. So there's a whole bunch of use cases for this that we've run into as we've started to roll it out. Where we were working at Dave on this is a large statewide system, and the initial goal was to just provide a unified global address list across the 60+ schools. And it's really started to grow from there. We had the ability to use contact objects or organizational contacts, but those aren't used nearly as much today. And with the advent of the B2B accounts, they're significantly more advantage to a B2B account versus a contact, such as we mentioned earlier. So we started looking at a shared services model now where we can host the centralized SharePoint site. We can have teams up there that individuals can collaborate in. We can do shared resources across the board, and it's been a really nice experience so far. One of the nice things, particularly in a disparate environment, is that this works with Google as well as Office 365. So if you want to have a synchronized address book, you want to be able to create those B2B accounts, and one of the schools in your environment is a G Suite school, that's not going to stop them. We can go through and we can add those in as well. We are limited. G Suite doesn't support B2B accounts, obviously, but they would get contact objects in that directory that they could take advantage of. So really, really straightforward process. You go through and create a data source. Data source is just a connector into that system. It'll be slightly different for a Google environment, right? So you got to go through and supply a certificate file, and we've got documentation that creates that. If it's on the Office 365 side, it's just a registered application with the correct permissions, and you supply the name, identifier, secret, etc. Once that's in your environment, all you really have to do is create a synchronization policy. And that sync policy is really straightforward, and it can be more custom if you'd like. Okay. So you create your rule. You define whether it's going to be active or not. You select your source. One of the nice things about the source selection is it's going to allow you to select scoping groups. So you don't have to grab everyone from this tenant. You can pick an individual group in Azure Active Directory in this particular instance to scope down your sourcing. So if you had a medical school and a college and you were just worried about specific professors or specific students that had crossover, you could have a group in Azure Active Directory. It could be a dynamic group. It could be a group that's synchronized up from on-premise, what have you, and it'll take all of its cues from there and won't touch anyone else. You select the downstream side wherever you're going to go, whether you're going to do a contact object or a B2B object, and then you've got a really basic wizard over here. For most cases, this works fine. You just go through and say, all right, I want to do the display name. This is the format I want it to be in. I want to have it show up in the address list or not, right? I can always have it come in there, or I can use same as source or not have it at all. Same as source is nice if you've got an environment that's FERPA is a major concern, whether they show up in the address list or not, so you can see what's in the source environment. Again, if you had that collegiate side and a student had enrolled and selected the FERPA flag and you didn't want them to show up in the gal on either side, you could take that advantage of that. You could do tagging, so we can specify constants in here and those type of things. But it makes for a very nice and easy way to synchronize data between the environments, and it's constantly updated. In addition to that, we have the ability to do custom attributes. So any custom attribute that's in the environment, extension attributes that you synchronized up from on-premise Active Directory, or that you've got applications that have created these, you can synchronize these as well. Important reasons behind that, reasons you may want to do that, is if you're really looking to do a unified environment or shared services, and you need to inject these in a SAML search. Maybe you're using Azure Active Directory, single sign-on components, and you need specific attributes. You can pull those in, these custom attributes from on-prem or where have you, and then they can be used to assert in those SAML searches. And then the final thing is a custom flow here. So we have the ability to go through, if you didn't like the way the display name looked in one of the out-of-the-box formats, you could come through here and create a custom display name. So maybe you want to have it show up last name, comma, first name, and then you want to put parentheses in the organization they came from. That's a very common ask, particularly when you've got multiple organizations, and maybe, God forbid, you've got more than one Chris Irwin. You want to know which organization they're in. It could be any other attribute, but that's probably the most common one. So it gives you an easy way to go through and customize those attribute flows so that the data shows up in your organization the way you want it to, particularly if you're going to be publishing that information. If it's not going to show up in the gal or something, it's not nearly as big of a deal, but we could absolutely use this to build attributes on the fly that are used in SAML versions or dynamic group memberships, B2B accounts. In many instances can be used to drive application access through dynamic groups. So maybe we go back to that, split college where you've got the medical school and you've got the campus side, or maybe it's a K-12 environment, a DOE, where you've got various teachers, and they may need access to certain applications. Maybe all of the teachers in a particular grade need access to a certain application. You could append that through a series of custom flows or even direct flows that exist in their environment, and use that to drive the dynamic group membership list in your tenant. So they automatically get created, they dynamically get put in the right group, and based on that group membership, they get access to a particular SSO application. So it makes for a very nice, seamless experience. One of the other major benefits, because you can create B2B accounts in Azure manually or with a script, but one of the nice parts about the tool is that it's constantly running and updating. So as people get removed, they'll get taken out. As people's names change, your information changes, that gets updated for you. And so there's really nice features and benefits to being able to drive that and have that constantly updated on a regular basis so that it's maintained. And I think probably the biggest, if you've ever tried to manage accounts for a loosely coupled organization, it could be very difficult, particularly on the deprovisioning side. If Dave and I are in two separate orgs and we're working together with B2B accounts and I get let go, Dave may not know for weeks or months, and I've still got a valid credential in his account or in his organization. because we've tied it together with these B2B accounts, as soon as the primary account gets removed, it removes the access in the down level organization. So it provides you with a lot more insurance that the accounts that you're allowing access in your environment should actually be there. They've still got a valid credential and wherever domain they're sourced from, whether that be G Suite, an on-premise Active Directory, or another cloud tenant. So from a Cloud Connect perspective, and one other aspect I want to touch on here, aside from the tenant-to-tenant stuff, is the ability to take advantage of on-premise accounts as well. I don't know if you guys spend much time with Azure SSO, but there's a component in there called Azure Application Proxy. So you can proxy out authentication for on-premise applications like SharePoint sites, et cetera, that are traditional hosted apps on-prem. In order to do that, you have to have the correct on-prem AD account. It doesn't necessarily have to be logged into, so they're not going to authenticate to it, but it has to be there to provide the ACLing. And what we've done is create an on-prem agent that you can deploy and have the service manage those accounts and manage the on-prem AD creation as well. When it creates them, it creates them with a super complex password, disables the account, sets smart card login, so no one's logging into it, but it's there to support that delegated authentication. So you can even take your legacy web applications and enable those for single sign-on utilizing this tool, the combination of Cloud Connect and Azure Application. So really cool stuff. We see lots of people taking advantage of that, and something if you've got any interest, we'd be more than happy to talk about. I want to point out one other thing. This is really easy to set up. We did this with a university, college and medical school out west, and in like 45 minutes, we had the entire thing stood up and running, accounts synchronizing, et cetera. So very, very light install footprint. It probably takes 5 minutes or less to create the application account and just a couple of minutes to set up the data source synchronization, and you're off and running. So you can get that enhanced collaboration experience in a matter of minutes, not hours or days. And it's really easy for you guys to start taking advantage of that and start getting some of the benefits as services that you've already got. So I wanted to leave a few minutes open, David. I don't know if you guys had any questions or anything else you wanted to cover.
Sorry about that. I was just trying to come off mute. So yeah, I think that there's a few questions. So it's great to see actually, there's some new things in here since the last time I kind of looked at this, Chris. I want to go back to kind of let's start with some of the simple things. Calendar Connect.
Yes,
you've rolled this out at some fairly large schools. Can you talk about kind of the scale and what that process looked like? And you don't need to get down into the weeds too far, but even just a relative cost maybe. It's not a $10 per mailbox kind of thing.
No,
it's pretty affordable.
It's very simple. We tried to kind of follow the Microsoft model where we can definitely do individual licenses, but if you license the faculty and staff, we give you all the students for free, which is usually the bulk of the accounts there. As far as the rollout and scale goes, all of these applications are entirely built and hosted in Azure. We use a combination of microservices, so they're very scalable. That's not an issue. They'll scale out as much as you want to put into them. The rollout is seriously a couple minutes. You go and download the zip file because it's an app manifest, right? And the same zip file works for everybody. And then you go and push that out via Teams policy. There's a bunch of Teams policies in here. You can go through and make it available in your store. You can go through and create a customized setup policy, which is about 5 clicks if you really want to do that, which is what I did here. Very, very basic process. There's not a whole lot to it. You just upload the app when you hit add here and then define what you want that list to look like. It takes 20 or 30 minutes and it'll start showing up in your Teams client. So it really is a matter of minutes to configure this and have it up and running. It doesn't take very much. What we see some folks do, and we have done this at a couple of very large organizations, but we've seen some folks will start with a few small pilot groups. They'll set it up for 5 or 10 users and kind of kick tires on it and then expand out from there. But this is not something that's going to take you weeks or months to roll out. It really is going to be a couple hours and you're done with it and getting to leverage the benefits there. From a cost perspective, the retail cost on it I believe, and Stephanie can correct me if I'm wrong here, was $3 a user a year. And then we've got bulk discounts available, obviously. And if you license the faculty and staff, it covers all the users.
Awesome. Awesome. So, so that's great. I know that that's been really, made some things really easy with a few of our accounts that maybe they had one population that was in a tenant that was on Google, right? The students maybe and the faculty and staff were in Teams, or I'm sorry, in Teams on Office 365. So that's been really helpful. Talk to us a little bit about, and again, we're happy to open this up for questions. So if you have questions, please either raise your hand or put them in the chat, because I have lots of questions on this. So in two of the large rollouts that I think we've been working on, between kind of two statewide things, what are some of the problems that you're trying to solve when you're doing this? And I know you jumped into kind of what it is that you can do, but talk to us about some of the strategic initiatives where we've been able to pull this in. So how do we land this in our organization?
It's generally, there's a couple of different angles, but generally advanced collaboration, right? We've got these disparate organizations that need to be able to collaborate in a more efficient fashion. They need to be able to take advantage of shared services. They want a unified address list that they can, there's already functionality built into Office 365 to share calendars between tenants. But it's not easy. You've got to go look them. You got to go, explicitly know their address. They don't show up in the gallon, those type of things. And so this makes this significantly easier. In the latest organization, statewide org that we rolled this out, that was the driving force, and that was the initial force in the first one. They really wanted a unified address list across the board. Once we got that in place, then we started talking to them about what else B2B objects can provide them. Then we expanded the scope. The hard work's already done. You've already got the account in place now. It's just a matter of adding them into Teams and giving them access, or adding them to SharePoint sites or various SSO applications. So in one project, that was driven really around gal synchronization across these organizations, they were able to light up a bunch of different services and take advantage of them in a multitude of ways that I don't believe they had anticipated to begin with.
So I'm gonna just kind of dig in a little bit there. So I heard disparate organizations. They're trying to do things like shared services. So those shared services may be collaboration, teaching, distance education. It may be security operations centers. It may be even administration of Office 365. So the scenario that we're all dealing with is there's less money coming in the front door for most organizations, right? I can think of 5 or 6 anomalies, right, that were already online universities that have exponentially grown, right? But some of the statewide systems, right, very challenging for our local school districts and K through 12, as well as higher ed, and even some of our medical centers around having to do more with less, right? So instead of having 20 different people running security operations across 20 tenants, maybe you consolidate some of that into one organizational entity, right, Chris? That's kind of driving one of these scenarios.
That's one of them. So I'll give you a specific example. We're working with a medical school and a collegiate, and the medical school is really driving this, not only because they want to collaborate with the collegiate side of the house, but they've got partner organizations. They've got some external hospitals that they work with and research institutions that they need to collaborate with. And so this is an easy way for them to do that. There's not a lot of overhead. It takes the administrative burden off of them. So now, instead of having to send emails back and forth or generate service desk tickets, their local admins put someone in a group, and within a couple of minutes, I've got access to the applications that I need in the other organization, because they've gone through and they've configured the dynamic group memberships and stuff that go along with it. And we used to call this 0-day productivity when we were doing it from on-prem, but it really is. It reduces the amount of time it takes to get access to those applications and make those individuals productive across orgs. And I would say we see this a lot in higher ed, state systems, medical universities, but in the K-12 space, particularly with Department of Education, they struggle with this. They've got hundreds and hundreds of districts that they're trying to provide a shared services model for. And that's a big thing to take, a big undertaking, particularly when you're trying to deal with legacy technologies that require firewall rules, et cetera. This is, leveraging cloud directories. So there's no network infrastructure to mess with. You can have this up and running in a couple of minutes and starting to leverage that.
Awesome. Awesome. And then the other piece, what are some of the obstacles or some of the obstacles that I've seen, right, even inside of one university where they might have, 10 different colleges inside of one university. And let's say that there's a central IT org, but there's a lot of disparate stuff that happens downstream, right? So I think of about maybe one of our friends down in the New York City area where there's a very strong IT presence, right? That's centrally managed, and it's actually creating some lack of agility in some cases, right? So they're trying to steer the battleship and make sure that everything's safe, and yet all the schools still want to have some of their own branding. They want to have control of their own environment. They want to be able to get teams up and running. And so B2B is also another potential to be able to still keep a lot of that best things that you can do from a system perspective, but also still keep some of that agility where, hey, if you have the skills and you want to use some of these tools, you can still do things like distance learning very quickly. You can still have things like collaboration set up instead of trying to deal with everybody being a guest of everybody else.
No, that's spot on. And having everything in a single tenant is great from a management perspective, but it can be restrictive because there are going to be institutions, depending on what they're dealing with, that require different rule sets. If you've got a medical school in there, you've got to comply with HIPAA, and that's going to affect everyone in the tenant. So in those instances, we do end up with multi-tenant environments where, the larger schools that can manage it themselves, they want to do their own branding, et cetera. Those environments exist on a pretty regular basis, and this is trying to find that happy medium and give them, the collaboration that they need while still being able to be independent.
Awesome. So we'll record this, and I'll give it one last chance here. Love to get any thoughts or input from anybody from the community. We generally get some feedback. I don't know that we've actually shown this before over the last 3 years in MS Office Hours. If anybody has any questions, anything, Heather or anybody from the community?
No questions on my end. I'm just excited to see. I'm a sucker for anything that's easy to get rolled out. So
Awesome.
I love that part of it.
Geico might be mad, but it's so easy a caveman could do it.
I was going to add too that I think it's a really great option. Again, when you've got a ton of time invested maybe in content build inside of G Suite, I know the migration can be really the turn off and the non-sell, but I think having something like this where you can integrate back in and have everyone under this one collaboration umbrella is really important. So this was eye-opening for me. Great information. Thanks, Chris.
Not a problem.
Awesome.
We appreciate it.
Awesome. So I'm going to turn off the recording here real quick, and then we'll say our adieus. All right, stop recording. All right.